Hello and welcome to the Blockleader show with me, Gillian Gotzo, where today we have a really exciting guest. His name is Conor Daly, and he is a race car driver in IndyCar, NASCAR, and lots of other Indy 500, lots of other racing going on. So, Conor, thank you so much for accepting my invitation to come on the show here today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. I saw you because it's going to be about polka dot. But before we get there, um, I was going to say, how does one become a race car driver? And then, of course, the other thing is that your father is the very famous Irish Formula One, the most famous Irish Formula One driver, Derek Daly. But tell me a bit about it. I was going to say, how, I mean, I guess I should really say, was it possible for you not to be a race car driver?
Well, it's a great question. I it was all I knew growing up for sure. It's a route that some people for sure don't really understand because with a stick and ball sport or anything that's a little bit probably easier to get into, you just go to a field and you play it. You can get something like that quite easily. But for racing, there's go-karts that you start in. And for me, when I was growing up, my dad actually retired when I was born. So I never saw my dad racing, but
Mhm.
all I saw around the house were pictures of race cars and, things of that nature. My mom worked at a racetrack and my dad was doing television for racing broadcasts. So I obviously knew that my family, we were this was all that I knew. And it was awesome for me. I loved it. So it was a great exposure to that. But yeah, one thing my dad never wanted me to do was like be forced into racing. Like he never wanted to push me into it. He always wanted me to ask to do it. A lot of drivers actually start sooner. I started when I was 10 years old, which seems young, but a lot of drivers start at 5, 6, 7 years old in little tiny go-karts, which kind of seems hard to believe, but it's true. And we had a neighbor of ours when I was 10 years old who actually asked my dad to help them because they had bought a go-kart and they knew he obviously knew about racing and cars and everything mechanical. And I just happened to go along with them because I didn't know it was actually possible to be a driver. I just thought they were all heroes and everyone was born into being a racing driver. It's kind of a weird perspective actually of how I thought about it. But yeah, we went out to a go-kart track. I got into the go-kart and really, really enjoyed it. And I had asked then if we could do more of this. And so, from then on, my dad was like, all right, well, let's give this a shot. So yeah, so that a long time ago now, but we
But you
got
were
into the
actually you were very
go-karts and yeah.
successful early on. I see you were, at age 10, you won the World Karting Association Grand National.
Yeah, as we got into go-karts, it seemed to go well, which was nice. So
Yeah.
thankfully, once we started winning some stuff, I was like, 10, 11, 12, local stuff was good. But when you look at who we were competing against locally, it's actually kind of funny now. Me and Joseph Newgarden, who is last year's Indy 500 champion, two-time IndyCar champion, both of us were racing together in go-karts when we were 12 and 13. So like you think, oh, we're just winning little tiny races here. Turns out you're going against some, really good people at a young age. So that was really cool to kind of see how we both grew. But yeah, started very young, got into cars when I was about 15-ish, before I had a license, which is kind of that's the way to go.
Do you have
But
to have a
yeah,
license to race at 15, or it's
technically not a road license,
not a
no, but
road
you can get
license?
a
Yeah.
you can get a driving license. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And it's kind of the way I compare it, motorsport in general, and this is very an American comparison, but kind of similar, I guess, in any sport around the world. But there's, in America, you'd probably play football in middle school, probably play in high school. That's like 4 to 6 years. Then you play in college. That's another 4 years before you get to the pros. So there's a long way, and any other sport, you're going to go through junior levels before you get to the pros. And it's the
Hmm.
same thing with racing, just slightly bigger cars every level, right? You go a little bit bigger, a little bit faster, a little bit bigger, a little bit faster. And then kind of takes years. And essentially it took me until I got to a college age when I made it to the professional levels of racing. So it's kind of interesting.
Did you actually go to college, or did you work full time in racing?
Yeah, so when I went to high school, I graduated. My parents wanted me to graduate. They said, you got to graduate high school. So that's fine. But I was racing full time. I had already
Yeah.
won a major championship when I was 18. So I moved to Europe. I moved to England when I was 18. and then started pursuing Formula One for the next 4 years. So my 4 years after high school, I spent living overseas and trying to be a Formula One driver. So
Wow.
that was my college education.
I bet that was a lot of fun.
You know what? I went by myself. Like my parents were obviously working here in America, so I just kind of lived with a family friend of ours, and you know got to experience a lot. But it's funny looking back on it now because you focus so much on doing your job that I wasn't doing anything outside of racing. So I didn't, you know, we got to go to all over the world because we're following the Formula One schedule, and so you see all of Europe. You know, you get to the Middle East, you get to a little bit of Asia, and I saw racetrack and hotel. That's about it. You know, because like we're just so focused on doing our job, and it's cool to say you got to go to so many places, and I got
Yeah.
to see so many things. But realistically, as an athlete, you're so focused on being the most professional you can be, being the highest level athlete you can be, and it's amazing. You kind of can't take in all those things while you're doing that.
Well, if there's me mistakenly thinking you were having a wild time away from your
Oh,
parents and racing driver, you know, you see all these great glitz and glamour and all
yeah.
the thing that goes with it. But
It's a grind. Yeah, it's a grind,
wow,
but
to
it's all worth it. But
to
yeah,
be
it's
successful.
definitely tough.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's pretty cool. So then if you went from Formula One then to IndyCar, is that the progression that you went? And can you explain again, apologies to I'm not very car focused, the
that's all
difference
right.
between Formula One and IndyCar? What are the main differences?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, my route was essentially you have Formula One, Formula Two, and Formula Three now. So I went through Formula Three, won races there, went into Formula Two at a very partial schedule, and I was a Formula One reserve driver. Kind of that's the route that you go,
Yeah.
and then our funding and our whole situation kind of ended there, and had to kind of reroute my career. And obviously, I live in Indianapolis, born and raised in Indianapolis, even though I do have an Irish passport as well. But you know, IndyCar I knew very well, and so the difference between Formula One and IndyCar, they're actually quite similar. Formula One is only road and street circuits. There a lot more money is spent in Formula One because it is a larger entity. You know, Formula One is a world championship, very large
Right.
entity. You know, you have Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes, all these manufacturers that are spending, you know, $250 million a year. Whereas IndyCar, you know, we're more North American based. IndyCar used to race in Brazil and several other places. You know, we used to race in Japan, but we kind of focused on the North American market. But the cars, you know, on a road and street course, Formula One will be faster, but we also race on oval track. So the Indy 500 being an oval track, so we're going much faster than Formula One cars will ever go. You know, on that oval track, a little bit different. Our cars are a little bit heavier because they have to be safer to race on the oval tracks
Hmm.
because we obviously could hit things a lot harder at that speed.
What type of
Um,
speeds? Sorry to interrupt. What type of speeds are you going at?
yeah, so we're doing in miles an hour about 244, 245 miles per hour. So
Eye-watering.
kilometers, it's a lot as well.
Yeah.
So we're definitely rolling. Yeah. So it's the highest speed racing for sure that there is really on the planet on a circuit. So that's a little bit of the difference. But
Yeah.
the thing with the major motor races in the world, right? You have the Le Mans 24-hour race, which is a sports car event. They call it the Triple Crown. You have the Monaco Grand Prix and the Indianapolis 500. Those are kind of the three big races that everyone wants to win. You know, we have several Formula One drivers come over to race the Indy 500. We have a NASCAR driver, one of the NASCAR champions, coming to race in the Indy 500 this year because the Indy 500 is that is what people want no matter where you are. It's essentially the biggest trophy in motorsport. That some people would argue that, but I think most people would agree.
And tell me, so if you don't mind being a bit boastful, some of your successes, because I know you've got quite a few titles under your belt.
Well, I've been I'm actually really bad at talking about myself because I feel very lucky to have be you know to have been you know where I've been, but yeah I've won races at really almost every level of all the like the ladder system up to IndyCar. So there's three championships on the way to IndyCar. I've won two of the three championships overall, won several races there. One in the Indy Lights level, which is under IndyCar. Never actually competed in that full championship because I went to Europe. But won a couple races in F3, 13 podiums, I think, in F3, two pole positions. So like quite a lot of trophies in F3. I don't know actually if any people have more trophies than I do overall, like when it comes to podiums in F3, because I was on the podium a lot. Thankfully, it
Yeah.
was very nice. But yeah. And then in IndyCar, I've done over 100 races now in IndyCar, which is awesome. Driven for more probably smaller teams, not quite the best situation overall, but I've been on the podium in IndyCar. I've been on the pole in IndyCar, which I actually being on the pole in IndyCar, which is qualifying first. I think that's one of my favorite accomplishments because everyone in IndyCar is very, very good. And it's when you
Yeah.
qualify better than everyone else, it feels good. So that's pretty cool. And then yeah, obviously having several top 10 finishes, top fives, won several other random things as well, but have done the Daytona 500, which is the biggest NASCAR race, which is very cool. I think I'm only one of 29 drivers who have done both the Indy 500 and the Daytona 500 in the same year, which is kind of cool. So yeah, there's been a few
Impressive.
things that I've got to do.
And then may I ask, how long of a career? You mentioned your father retired when you were born. Is there, I mean, and I know this morning you were saying you were at the gym before this interview, but how long can you race for? Is there like a cutoff point?
I mean, realistically, it's until you either feel you've lost the competitiveness or you're not able to produce what you've been able to produce in the past. Because I think there's an IndyCar driver who literally just won the last race a couple of days ago, who's late in his mid 40s, right? So like,
Yeah.
there's people that are doing it at a high level.
Mm,
Um, and then there's also sports car racing categories to where you can go a little bit later if you feel like it, if you're able to produce the results that are still capable. But yeah, you do it as long as you can do it, as long
yeah.
as you want to do it. My dad got to a point where he no longer, I think, no longer wanted to dedicate everything to being, as good as he could be. He won sports car races, and then he was like, you know what, this is it. He's like, and it's funny because he gets offered to drive maybe some of these random like historic cars or things like that, and he's like, nope, I have no interest. Like I just like it kind of got to that point where you dedicate your whole life to it and it kind of either the fuse burns out or something like that because you have to as a driver you have to put everything into being competitive and you want to be the best every single time. It takes your entire mind, your entire body. It's dangerous, so there's limitations to that for some people.
Perhaps you being born might have been a catalyst for your father to retire as well,
Definitely potentially that as well, yes.
Responsibilities, responsibilities.
Yes.
So, and I just ask, I don't know, have you had any accidents or have you been,
Oh,
have,
plenty. Yeah, yeah. No,
okay, okay.
there's yeah, it's part of this sport for sure. It's not if you crash, it's when. There's going to be a point like that. I've been very lucky to avoid injury, though. Definitely, knock on wood, but always been, thankfully avoiding all that. But yeah, I've been in some massive ones before. Everyone has at some point. It's just part of what we do. I mean, it's a
Mm,
dangerous game that we play. But yeah, the cars are so safe these days too that we're very lucky. In my dad's era, those guys were psychos. I mean, they were getting injured and killed every year. You know what I mean? So I'm very lucky my dad made it through, and he's still got plenty of injuries and scars from his era.
yeah.
To show how crazy it was back in the 70s and 80s. But we're very lucky now to be as safe as we are.
It's funny. I'm just thinking that my kids, they're grown up now, they're grown up women, but we did ponies and horses. They're quite dangerous too. Do you
Very
know?
dangerous. Yeah, I don't want to get in a fight with a horse. Yeah, no way.
Anyway, they unfortunately they didn't have any injuries. So then tell me, you're also a podcaster. So you're taking after your
Mm.
father again. You like media. You think that that would be a natural segue when you do retire at a far distant time.
Yeah, no, I enjoy talking about what I love, right? I've dedicated my entire life to this sport, to IndyCar racing, to motorsport in general. I love, I still have a lot of my friends compete in Formula One. A lot of my friends compete in the NASCAR championship. So like I like talking about motorsport because I enjoy sharing it with people and I hope to open more people's eyes to it.
Yeah.
Our sport, we have to fight for viewership, right? Everyone's watching either the NBA, the NFL, all this stuff in America is so popular to watch right now. And you got to fight for those eyes and make it entertaining or just share it with people who haven't been exposed to it before. So for me, I really enjoy doing that. It's not work to me. I just enjoy, I talk far too much. So I enjoy being able to put that onto a platform that goes out to people and who seem to appreciate it. People seem to say they like the podcast. It's called Speed Street if you want to listen to it, but it's a fun show to do and we enjoy just sharing what I think our sport of IndyCar racing has to offer.
That's cool. So we mentioned your dad quite a few times. I'm going to go back to him now. So Derek Daly, Derek Patrick Daly. I think
Mm.
is he Ireland's only Formula One racer, or certainly the most famous one, so successful?
There was Eddie Irvine as well.
Oh
Eddie Irvine
yes,
drove for Ferrari, yeah,
yeah.
but it was really my dad and Eddie who I think are really the most notable ones.
Hmm.
Um, and but yeah, very very proud, Irish heritage in Formula One there, which is really cool.
And you were saying you've an Irish passport.
Yeah, most all the only reason I traveled through Europe for 4 years very kind of easily was on my Irish passport, thankfully. So that was great, and a lot of my family still lives in Dublin. My nana's in Dundrum, so we were there over the winter last year. And my cousin Nikki Daly played for the Irish Olympic field hockey team,
Yeah.
so we got to cheer for her competing for Ireland at the last Olympics. So a lot of really cool connections to Ireland still. I still have the Irish flag on my helmet on one side. I have an American and Irish flag, so it's
Oh,
pretty cool.
that's very cool. We can claim you as our own. So
Absolutely.
finally, the reason why we started talking was I saw you were being sponsored by Polka Dot. So maybe can I start from the beginning? When did you first discover blockchain, cryptocurrencies? How did that happen?
I've been fascinated by the blockchain world, by basically anything that has to do with the future and high tech stuff. I myself cannot claim to be a techie. Like I am not someone who is able to do something. Like I am not going to be your tech leader, but I love to understand it. I love to understand what's going on or try to.
Hmm.
And I've made a lot of friends. When people really started talking about Bitcoin at first, I was like, okay, that's interesting. This is something that I'd like to pay attention to. And then you kind of start expanding your mind a little bit more on, okay, well, what else is there that's going on? What are people building? What Web3 was a term. I was like, well, what is that? You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
then you start discovering that there are so many people and that there are so many groups of very, very smart people who are building things and who are basically shaping what the future of the internet looks like. And I use the internet every day, quite often. So to know that there was even more and there is still being more developed every day was fascinating. And obviously there's money being made, there's money being invested, there's all kinds of things that's being done in this world, and you want to be up on all those things. And so I have enjoyed learning about the whole, essentially the crypto world. That's what I would call it. And it's been fascinating. And so when this deal came, my teammate drove a Bitcoin car at the Indy 500 a couple years ago, and that was like a big deal. And then I've kind of just continued to learn about it myself. So yeah, and here we are with a polka dot car, at the Indianapolis 500, which I think is super exciting.
So how did you land on Polkadot? Because obviously there's a lot of different ecosystems there. Polkadot's a very, actually, it was interesting. Polkadot's a very strong technical solution.
Hmm.
A lot of, Gavin Wood, a lot of very, very brainy people, as you say, in that space. Not too many racing drivers, I don't think. It's a jump. It's a good jump, a good jump. So, but how did you land on Polkadot?
Well, honestly, it was all thanks to a DM on Twitter. That was lit, and that's how we communicated as well. But
Yeah.
I had got reached out to by an account on Twitter. It was at Learn Polkadot, and I was like, okay, what is this? As my buddy is now my friend of mine, Chris, and he sent me a long message on like, hey, I think this would be a really cool thing for us at Polkadot to be a part of a the largest attended sporting event in the world. So a very big, splash into the mainstream world of sports. And he explained why and how it could happen. And it was a very long message. He used a lot of words. And I didn't really read through it at first because I get so much on the internet sometimes that is just complete garbage. And I respect people for trying, but a lot of it is garbage. And but I looked through it again because we didn't know what we were doing for a primary sponsor yet, a primary partnership for the Indianapolis 500. And obviously we wanted to have the best possible chance at winning this race. And to do that, you do need partnerships like this. The financial contribution helps the team, do as much prep work as possible. We can go to the wind tunnel to make sure the car is efficiently running as fast as possible, all these different things. And so when I started reading about Polkadot, I said, all right, well, this is fascinating. So you're telling me I have to convince this community that this is a good idea. And that was actually kind of cool. Now I am not really like I don't talk about I'm not an overly confident or arrogant person. So I'm like I just like to show up and do my job, but I'm having to hear like I'm having to now sell myself very hard and be like, hey, this is I think the right way to do it. But it actually ended up being not too difficult because I love the Indy 500 so much and I know the power of it. And I know that, hey, look, if the polka dot community wants to really make a splash, wants to really get onto an entirely new level of awareness to a whole group of people that might not know anything about polka dot, and well, this is the place to do it. And so I was able to have a great conversation with a lot of different folks in the polka dot community that were very, very helpful for me to understand, hey, all right, this is dot, this is the token, this is how it works. Gavin Wood, obviously, boom, creator. Yep, I knew Ethereum, got it. Okay, cool. Putting all these things together. Talked to my dad about it. My dad's like, oh yeah, I own dot. Like I know
I
exactly
love
what
that.
that is. I'm like, that's kind of crazy. I had no idea.
Mm.
Um, my little brother Christian as well. He was apparently he was into it also. Did not know that. So again, it just takes it. You just got to put it in front of someone. And once it was put in front of me, I was like, "Yep, no idea why I didn't know about this." So that was our whole goal. Is like, hey, look, this is a high level sports partnership that is very unique. It's going to be a story that I think a lot of people will respond to. A lot of people will just have questions about, which is
Mm.
important. If they have questions about it, that means that there's an interest, and you start driving that just awareness up to a higher level. I have a show, I have a podcast, I like to do a bunch of other stuff that I have a lot of great friends in my network that are also very very supportive of what I'm doing. So it all just made sense to the community, thankfully, and we were able to put up this proposal, to make it happen. So it's a wild story, but it all started on Twitter, and here we are now with a major Indy 500 partnership, which is really really cool and a great looking race car also.
Of course. May I ask the size of the grant? Is that
Yeah, it was 290,000 dot. Yeah, so it was about at the time it was like 2.1 million dollars USD. And so all of the details too, which this was wild for me, was basically just being totally open with how everything is spent. That's normally never not ever really discussed. It's also you very like low key. But it was just kind of like, but this is kind of what it is. Like it was what it costs. Like this is the Indy 500. Motor racing is expensive, but also winning is hard and expensive. The teams that are, most well funded are usually the most successful, right? So we want to be successful. We want to be able to bring, polka dot to more and more people. So we want to be successful. So it all worked out. There's a lot of things that we can now do with this to then also activate around it, right? My manager, Andrew, has also done a great job in putting together a few programs that we're going to have during the month of May for people to be, what is dot? Okay, boom, here it is. You know what I mean? Like we're going to, we're going to have a QR code on our hero cards that we hand out all during May. We go through thousands of them, that people can scan to bring them to a landing page. All right, boom, this is how you either download your wallet or whatever it is. All of those things we can now do because we've got this, the funding that's been transferred. So it's a great situation.
and what do you think next will happen? So do you think like if you're when you're successful, sorry, let me rephrase.
Yeah,
When you're successful with this thing, would you go back to the well again? Do you think how good is the relationship with the community? Is it because you had to persuade them to actually
absolutely.
invest
Yeah.
in you? It wasn't just like I mean when the community had to vote on it. So are you enjoying that, building that community?
I would say with how well it was responded to only when we announced it.
Mm.
And I was able to put together a couple videos like for my YouTube channel, kind of explaining it a little bit more. And the response was like, we don't think we've ever had a polka dot ambassador like this before. And I was like, well, that's wild. Like I've just been trying to do like, this is my job. Like my job is race car driver, but the most important part about race car driver is making sure there are people that support you doing it, because having the funding around you, having the partnerships around you is the only way to continue basically establishing your legacy in the sport or establishing your position in the sport, because it is a business, right? It's all a business. And so it seemed like everyone really responded well to it. The announcement was fantastic. and seeing the car on track. We only did one short practice day with the car on track, sadly, because it got rained out, which was very, very annoying. But the amount of, I guess, response we got to that was fascinating. So it seemed very good. And I was just, at the same time, I was like, guys, this is day one. We have the rest of this month still in April, which is almost over now. But like once May starts, I'm throwing out the first pitch at the Chicago Cubs game in 2 days, all with my polka dot stuff on. You know what I mean? We're doing these major things with other sporting, groups. Just found 2 YouTube videos today that I just did with my friend who has 2.6 million YouTube subscribers. Polka dot hat on, everything. So like, these are the small things that people might notice, but it just drives these questions. Oh, polka dot. Well, what is that? That's very cool. This is like an exciting, thing that we're a part of now. So I do hope that, yes, my goal would be to do the full season of IndyCar next year.
Yeah.
To do a bigger partnership. If everyone agrees that, hey, because this was realistically a small spend, compared to, we would have this $2.1 million spend for the Indy 500 and a couple other small races. Okay, well, if that was really well responded to, I mean, we're going to need to try to up that, hopefully, to, a full season partnership, 17 races the whole year long. That's at minimum 6 million USD. So like, realistically, according to some of the other, spends and the amount of funding that goes out, it doesn't look like a massive amount when it comes to the treasury in general. But I would like to be able to convince everyone that, hey, we're going to have this year-long program where every different event in 17 different markets, 16 different markets, we can do something exciting. We can do something cool. So that would be my goal now, seeing how well it was responded to. But obviously, we still have a job to do throughout the rest of this year to make sure that by the end of the year, they're like, dang, this was like completely worth it.
Well, I think your timing is good too with the bull run coming. At least we're not going into a winter again, so it's
Yeah.
hopefully the value will rise. So thank you so much for your time. It's lovely to chat with you. It's great to discover the Irish connection and the polka dot connection. And I wish you every success on the track.
Thank
I
you.
really do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that.